Hey everybody. I think I jumped the gun on that one, but Dustin DePirac here, Jeremy Price, columnist of the Herald Times. So we're here at Mackey Arena. We're on floor level at the moment. It's actually kind of knee high to us right now. But anyway, Indiana comes in here and stomps Purdue unlike they've ever done in this building before. I think there was some discussion, thought, fear, concern about, trap games and whatnot. I mean, it didn't sound like Indiana was, playing towards a trap game was by any means distracted because it was their rival. But if you had any concerns at all, if you had any worries with whether or not they were going to be focused, they were. 97-60, eviscerated, dominated, crushed, demolished, everything, whatever word you want to use for a blowout. It's the biggest win by Indiana in the series, I think by anybody in the series, since they won 106-65 back in 1992. And I think this is the worst loss Purdue has ever suffered in Mackey Arena by a long shot. I'm pretty sure the worst previous one was by about 21 points, and they go down by 37 tonight. Just pretty much in every way. I mean, Indiana was not flawless in this game, but they were close enough, number one, and this is as bad as, against a Purdue team that's not bad. I mean, I think Purdue is eventually an NIT team. To come in and drill a team like this on the road, that says something, I think.
Yeah, you could certainly make the case that this was Indiana's best game or most complete game of the season. To go on the road and to win this way in a game where it wasn't just a case of hot shooting or a lot of three-pointers or what have you. It was just a dominating effort overall.
No, that's an interesting way to put it. I mean, because somebody asked on the live chat earlier if we thought this was their best performance, and Carolina, I think, was their most dominant of a good team. But that was because North Carolina wanted to play the way that Indiana wanted to play, and Indiana wanted to play it even more than they did, so they just ran. And they were just able to outrun people, and they just looked dominant just simply because of the fact that they had a 7-footer who can run like a deer. And that was pretty much the determining factor of that game. They were able to cause just enough turnovers, get running just enough to just look phenomenal in that type of play. But Purdue doesn't want them to play the way they want to play. They're not as good at being restrictive as, say, Wisconsin is or even Northwestern. But Purdue still didn't want them to play fast. They still wanted to play tight man-to-man and not have a whole lot of possessions. But Indiana dictated on just so many levels and so many different ways. I mean, like you said, it wasn't just because a whole bunch of threes went in. They only shot 40.6% in the first half, but had a 20-point lead by the time that was done. They got the ball, especially in the first half, got the ball inside, got fouled, went to the line 17 times, made 16 free throws. This is one of the best free throw shooting nights. Owned the boards, especially in the first half. Offensive rebounded extremely well, got a bunch of second chance points, and then eventually got the turnovers and got running. It just got basically, at some point, every part of the game worked. It didn't necessarily all work well at the same time, but in some way, shape, or form, everything that Indiana wanted to do happened.
Yeah, and I think probably the biggest thing to take away as a positive, maybe the Indiana defense.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Because this was a case where obviously Purdue shot 50% for I think the first 10 minutes or so of the game, but as we kind of talked about going into this one, that's not really typical Purdue, and they're prone to some shooting slumps, some scoring droughts, and when they did hit one,
did they have them. Yeah.
They were in trouble. But Indiana, forced 18
turnovers.
18 turnovers.
Yeah, 18 turnovers, and they scored 20 off of those, and those are pretty big.
Obviously, dominated the glass as well.
Yeah, they did. The one guy they couldn't stop, obviously, was A.J. Hammonds. Now, he got some garbage buckets late because, they took Zeller out in the last 3 minutes, although some might argue that it took a while for IU to get its starters out. But, Hammonds had a few extra ones, but for the most part, he really had to work for them. He was pretty unbelievable. Despite the fact that Purdue didn't have much else, but Hammonds looked like a kid who's going to be an all-Big Ten player for a couple years. I mean, I don't know about this year, but he's going to be one. He had 30, but that's half of Purdue's points. The only other guy that scored in double figures was Ronnie Johnson. No one else had more than 4. So that's starters, everybody. No one else had more than 4 points other than those two guys.
And one of the interesting things to me is that Indiana decided not to go with a double team in the post on Hammonds tonight, which is contrary to what they've done in the past and what they did against Derek Nix at Michigan State just on Sunday. I think sort of maybe the thought process is what I thought would have been a good idea on Sunday is give up the 2 occasionally in the post
to
defend the 3 and the other spots. And the rest of the Indiana defense was enough ball pressure, enough in the passing lanes, enough taking the rest of the Purdue guys out of what they wanted to do, that even though Hammonds had a good game, he cannot single-handedly keep the pace. Yeah. Plus, he was in foul trouble trying to guard Cody Zeller as well.
Yeah, he had that issue as well. He only had 3, wasn't terrible, but yeah, no, you're exactly right. And I think on some level this was a reaction to Sunday night. I mean, I think kind of went through the study on on zone versus man in that game, and most of the time, Kareem was exactly right. They post doubled down, and Derek Nix was able to just pass out and find guys. Now, on some level, you think, okay, well, that was the senior, this is the freshman. On some level, he's going to be able to physically outwork you, but he's not going to be able to outsmart you and find the open man. I don't know, maybe on some level that was an overreaction, but it really didn't matter anyway because they just didn't give those up. I mean, they gave up the 2-point shots, and Hammonds was really good. Even when he was being defended reasonably well by Zeller, he was just able to just get buckets all kinds of different ways. But again, I mean, they didn't let that sort of double up on them. They let Hammonds get his points, and then after that, there was nobody else to score on them.
And as good as Hammonds was, it's probably worth noting that when Zeller picked up his 3rd foul there in the second half, Christian Watford slid over, and I thought actually did a really nice job.
He did a very nice job.
Hammonds, and was actually physical with him and kind of knocking him off of his spot on the block and really went toe-to-toe with him. Kind of displayed that toughness that a lot of people have been asking for.
There was one play that really stood out to me at the time, and I don't have a perfect recollection of it, but I remember just Hammonds getting the ball on the low block, and it just looked like one of those situations where Watford was just going to be overpowered, and he just refused to be. I think he had maybe one kind of partial block and just fought for the rebound just tooth and nail. He didn't get it, but I think Oladipo got it, but he just refused to be manhandled, and that's one of those places where you usually see Watford having a problem is when he's inside and guys are trying to be really physical with him and body him up and back him down. He didn't back down the night. I mean, he just played an all-in-all tough game, made 4 threes, was able just to get a lot done inside and outside.
And I thought that's a perfect illustration. There were a lot of perfect illustrations of this, but Indiana just had the will and the desire and the mentality that they were going to win this game, and they were not going to be denied, whatever the case may be.
And it says so much at this point. I mean, because you saw some drift from them early on in conference play, especially when they weren't really being challenged as much, and then when they were being challenged, it was against teams that really played a different style of basketball, like Wisconsin, like Northwestern. You saw them fade against Minnesota and almost allow that to be a game. Northwestern, obviously, those things. But they go out and win just a huge game against Michigan State, a really kind of establishing game that says, we belong in the top echelon of this conference. We're not faded to the middle of the pack at all. They beat, I think, what I think most people would have to say is the third most talented team in this league, and then came out on this one and just kind of kept it going. I mean, knowing full well that Saturday is going to be sort of a definitive game that decides, okay, who is the front runner in this conference at this point, and who's one of the front runners nationally at this point. And we're able to look at this game and say, it's a rivalry game, it's a game we have to win, it's a game that we have to maintain momentum, we have to play a solid brand of basketball. And Jordan Hall just pointed out for whatever it was in terms of beating Purdue as bad as they'd ever been beaten here. He said, I'm just happy that we put 2 really good halves together. That we were solid throughout, and we really just wanted to do that, and that's something they hadn't always done this season, is they managed to just be thorough.
And maybe in some ways this is sort of coming full circle for this Indiana team. Guys like Christian Watford, Derek Elston, Jordan Halls, who absorbed some tough lessons against teams like Purdue, H1 Moore, Juwan Johnson, Robbie Hummel, that they kind of come back around, and now Purdue's the one that's kind of getting the lesson taught to them in this case. And so maybe a part of this game was just the experience, the veteran leadership of Indiana against a very young and still learning and growing
absolutely.
Purdue team.
Absolutely. I mean, this is going to be, it's a different sort of rebuild. I mean, this Purdue rebuild is purely cyclical. It's a situation of just a great class graduates. It graduates in parts because of Hummel's injury, but an extremely talented group graduates, and then you have to start over. Whereas Indiana obviously had to start over for other different reasons, but it is a situation where Purdue's upcycle was Indiana's down cycle, and now Indiana's upcycle was Purdue's down cycle. But Indiana very much took advantage of that and said, you might not have been the same guys who handed it to us, but now that you're down, we're going to hand it to you. And at some point this is going to even out. I think the next 2 or 3 years, depending on who leaves Indiana at this point, next year and 2 years from now, I think are going to be the really good Indiana-Purdue matchups that are going to be just really, really fun to watch with 2 really talented groups.
Yeah, I would circle that 2 years from now, I would save the date.
Right, yeah, 2014, when this group of freshmen at Purdue is juniors, and you'll also have, whoever sophomores whoever stays out of next year's really talented freshman class, plus, Yogi Ferrell, Jeremy Hollowell, those type of guys. Indiana's still going to have talent at that point from this group that's here now. Those are going to be the really heavyweight Indiana-Purdue matchups in the future. So anyway, it gets really, really interesting on Saturday. College game day comes to town. Indiana-Michigan is playing pretty much for the top of college basketball, but it's them and Kansas at this point in terms of who's going to be number one this week. Number one next week. So it's going to be big time interesting. Get there early, guys. Thanks, everybody.